you, Chris and Charlotte.
Thanks, Helena, and welcome everybody to our webinar this morning. So as Helena's kind of already touched on, we're going to sort of talk how to power your business beyond waste. information about the description of waste. It might be the quantity of waste, the place and the date of the waste that's been generated, just so that it can be handled in the right way. And if it isn't, then obviously you're at risk of not being compliant under the duty of care.
Thanks, Charlotte. So next step is really to look at, does the waste need to be classified? So that could be, is it hazardous, is it not? So any waste provider should be well familiar with giving you, a description of the waste, and you ought to have a good idea of that yourselves, of course, as the creator of the waste, if that's what's happening on site. Non-hazardous waste documentation, typically electronic duty of care notices now, waste transfer notes, a lot of these are electronic now. Season tickets are very common, which is, of course, it reduces the admin and makes life easier. So as Charlotte was saying, really good to just make sure that you're on top of this, and really helpful to know exactly what the end of life is and treatment. And then, because you can then start to think about, well, can we optimize our waste? Is there anything we can do differently or better? In terms of hazardous waste, you've got the consignment note. So a little bit more control around hazardous waste, as you can imagine. And there are kind of two types of hazardous waste. There's the mirror hazardous and the mirror non-hazardous entries. So again, something to be aware of in terms of the slight differentiation between types of waste. So in terms of classification, something to do before it's collected, before it moves from your site or is transferred anywhere, is to look at the kind of codes, the waste codes that apply. And for kind of the appropriate codes, there's the list of waste, the European waste catalogue, and there's some other guidance as well around assessment of waste. So it's looking at quantifying quantifying and also finding the nature of waste, so characterising what the waste is, what kind of containers it's in, and how for SIC code as well for things like that in terms of the transferer. So some basic admin details there, about what the waste is, and that enables you to kind of map the types of waste that you're generating as a site, which again is really helpful to have that foundation for any waste optimization.
I think often as well, the EWC codes will be on your waste transfer notes, so you don't have to go right away and find that out. Your waste providers are already doing that for you, so just making sure that you are reporting within that.
Yeah, and they're not always easily visible, so just to make sure that that they're there, and then you can kind of record that as well. So you have a description and the code, and the code is great because it's unambiguous. So simple things really about storing waste safely and securely. Hazardous waste, you would want that to be either indoors or certainly covered and protected from all weather to prevent losses and leakage. And thinking about whether it's inside or outside, times of year, types of waste it is as well. So now we have a question, which really is an open-ended question. It's really, does your business have a waste management plan of any kind, or anything in place, policy, or an approach to waste management that helps you keep on top of that?
Okay, so we'll give you a few seconds to answer that. Can you maybe talk us through what a waste management plan is, Chris, while everyone's answering?
Yeah, I mean, it sets out how a business would approach waste arising on site, and it can cover everything from the simple, the kind of the compliance, the obligation side of it, through also to optimization, perhaps emphasis on things like the waste hierarchy, which we will cover later on, which is essentially looking at the most preferred environmental final treatment for waste. So we're thinking about reduce, reuse, etc. And there are strategies. So it's wide, and yeah.
So I think we've got some results coming through now. We can see quite a high number of you do have one, so that's really positive. A couple that are maybe unsure, where would we find this waste management plan in a business? I guess it might sit with compliance teams, it might sit with people in a warehouse, operations that are dealing with that waste. So yeah, it's a real range. So if you don't have one, that might be something that you want to consider somewhat. You might want to formally draft it up into sort of a PDF document or something that you can distribute within the company so everyone is on the same page on what's going on in terms of waste. What, especially in the offices, or what bins you should be putting things in as well, can also really help to optimize waste.
And like all documents of this nature, updating it regularly. Hopefully company ambitions change, objectives change. So it's a good kind of platform to be able to set out your goals, in the near term and perhaps the longer term.
Okay, awesome. I think we'll move on from there.
And now we're going to look at what's the circular economy. And the reality is that most businesses and households are engaging with the circular economy in some way. So we don't want it to, it's not this necessarily this sort of inaccessible, difficult situation. It's something that we're doing. Recycling is part of the circular economy. So, we're trying to kind of make it accessible. For context, on the big picture, the planet, we're looking at SDG 12.3, so halving food waste by 2030. So an example of that would be that the UK wants to, achieve reductions equivalent to 32% of what it had in 2007. So you're thinking about, perhaps as a business, setting a baseline and setting targets around that. So it's a good example of how it can work in terms of looking at those. And if you're obviously working in the manufacturing, retail, hospitality, or food supply chain, these are sort of things that you can, of course, contribute to and perhaps set goals in your own business around this sort of initiative.
So what is the circular economy? It's essentially a concept where we're moving from the linear model where we're making and we're disposing of resources, and products, materials are losing their value within the supply chain. They're getting disposed of or incinerated. We're losing that value. Whereas if we're moving towards a circular model, it's an economic system in which raw materials, components and products lose their value as little as possible. So we're retaining them within the system at their highest value in their product form or their material form. And essentially the key aim of the circular economy is to design waste out of the system. And we know that in nature, waste doesn't exist. Nature is 100% circular. So there is much to sort of mirror in that sense. But we also know abiotic sort of system where everything sort of flows in. So we know that one solution doesn't work for every business. So that's why it's a challenge, and we need to sort of rethink our existing approach to sort of improve that.
One of the goals of today is to kind of help identify perhaps points where a business can access or engage with the circular economy, and to give you confidence in that area if it's needed.
So the circular economy is essentially based off 3 key principles. So the first one is to eliminate waste, and this means waste prevention and reduction. It's one of the biggest goals. The problem and the solution starts with design. Currently, lots of products are designed to be disposed of, and it's inevitable in some situations that waste will be generated, but waste is actually a design choice. And as we've said already, there is no waste in nature. So an interesting fact is that 80% of all products' environmental impact is predetermined during the design phase. So if you start off with a product aiming for no waste, that's going to have a massive impact down the line, just through that simple design consideration. The second one is really to circulate products and materials, and this means keeping those materials in use either as a product or when they can no longer be used as a component or raw material. And in this way, nothing becomes waste, and the intrinsic value of the product and material is retained. So again, design plays that key role, and producers should continue to sort of design for either the technical cycle through maintenance and reuse, ensuring that a product stays at its highest value, or through a biological cycle where materials cannot be reused, but they'll be circulated back into the earth via composting or anaerobic digestion. And then finally, the third principle is really to regenerate nature. At the moment, we're just extract raw constantly the earth and not necessarily putting much back. So rather than continuous in practice, we need to build natural capital, increasing biodiversity, and return those biological materials back to the earth. So in this kind of agricultural practice, particularly within the food industry, we see lots of opportunity for this. And it just means that if we're creating less waste and we're creating more circularity, there's less need to extract from the earth, essentially, or from the environment. Now, this is quite a complex diagram, so maybe something to come back and have a look in your own time. But it's a diagram that the MacArthur Foundation sort of pulled together to represent the complexity of the circular economy, and it sort of shows the cascades and flows of materials and resources back into use or into the environment. So you can see the sort of green side is the biological cycle, and then we've got the technical side, which is the blue side. So yeah, perhaps something to come and have a look in your own time, but yeah, bit of a complex diagram. So instead of making you look at that diagram while we talk through some of the sort of key strategies, we've sort of pulled them out, and you can see our strategies here on the screen, which are a really good way if you're sort of in a business, you don't know where to start, having a look at these sort of strategies is a really good approach, and you can pick out bits that maybe you could quickly do, like quick wins, or the lowest hanging fruit. So refuse, so refusing to make waste essentially is what that means. It's making a product redundant by abandoning its function, or offering the same function by a radically different product. Rethinking, so making a product use more intent, so making sure that you have a product but you're making it reuse, it's shareable, it's got multifunctional elements to it. Reducing, obviously that's increasing the efficiency of a product in manufacture, or consuming fewer natural resources or materials in that process. Repair is a huge one, and we're seeing sort of repair cafes and things like that pop up all over the place, and some major retailers are offering sort of take back repair schemes, but it's essentially making sure that that product stays in its highest value in that product form. Refurbishment, so that might be restoring an old product or bringing it back up to date. So sometimes things can go back to also be remanufactured, so you might be using old parts within a newer product. And then repurposing is where sort of a product or parts in it can have a different function. And then we've obviously got recycling, which everyone seems to think is the core of a circular economy, but we've got many other levels of strategies to take in as well. And then recovery is sort of the last option. That might be through incineration of material to recover from energy. So yeah, some really key strategies that, again, perhaps best to come back and have a look in your own time and see.
Yeah, and just the key takeaway, just to add to Charlotte's point, is that we see that recycle is way down the list. Below it only is recovery, and then landfill. So yeah, looking above recycle is really where we want to be kind of aiming for.
Okay. So the waste hierarchy, which Chris has already mentioned, sort of ranks those waste management options to guide decisions according to what's best for the environment. So pretty much like these are strategies, we're seeing sort of waste prevention and preparing for reuse at the top, whereas we've got the sort of disposal at the bottom, and then recovery, so whether that's through anaerobic digestion or incineration. It's not quite as bad as disposal, but it's sort of lower to the bottom. It's least preferential in that terms. And when we were talking about the duty of care, producers or businesses should be considering the waste hierarchy under that legislation. It's something that when you have a waste stream, you should have a look at it and see, is there any way we can sort of raise it up the waste hierarchy in its achievement. So yeah, again, something that should be at the core of those waste management plans that we've touched on already. So the next thing we're going to talk about is the importance of the circular economy and why it's important to businesses, why it's important in our overall goals.
Okay, so we're going to have a think now about the really bigger picture in terms of the climate change crisis that we're facing. So the relevance to kind of net zero and this climate change is that, well, nearly half of the challenge or the solution to the problem is made in products. So it's the stuff, things that we consume, and food systems are obviously a big part of that, as well as packaging, transportation, construction, agriculture. So all part of that kind of that situation. So it's got a huge potential for improving our situation in terms of global warming. And we can see here, some significant amount of sort of greenhouse gas in terms of tons per year from some key kind of emission categories there, which agriculture, forestry and land is a significant one as well. So really, this is just about showing the kind of significance of our planet's consumption of resources.
So I think this is a massive thing for me. Before I started working in the industry, I was very focused on renewable energy and energy sort of being the solution to meeting net zero by 2050. But realistically, 45% also comes from products and that embedded carbon within those key things we use every day. So I think it's really important to justify that we will need to reach a circular economy if we are going to achieve our net zero goals. We can't just focus on that 55% energy. We have to take the other things, which is very important and why we're very passionate today.
Okay, so kind of pivoting now slightly to thinking how we can build that circularity into businesses. And it's happening. There's expectation from consumers. It's important to enter new markets, work with obviously retailers, as you all know well. A lot of expectation on them. From them, but it's also great for triggering innovation, really, and building that kind of confidence to keep trying and keep pushing for circularity solutions, which have that kind of carbon material and hopefully financial savings in the long run. You know, it is possible to deliver, you know, greater customer value and reduce costs. And of course, you know, in terms of talent, a lot of people now want to work for companies that are not only seen to be, but are actually, you know, doing the right thing in terms of sustainability and reducing their environmental impact. In a kind of volatile commodity and you know, material and resource trading situation globally, you know, it can give that kind of resilience and robustness as well, you know, and help kind of soften the blow of any kind of global you know, fluctuation and that volatility. You know, and regulation is only increasing. We see it across Europe with things like digital product passports. And in the UK, with, you know, packaging, extended producer responsibility, there's increasing expectation from governments and consumers to have better information about what you're placing on the market in terms of the packaging as well as the product as well, and thinking about life cycle as well. So there's an awful lot of positive things we can do there. And we can see here on the left the 8 priorities, you know, thinking of tackling food waste, you know, even as consumers, you know, cutting our calorie count, which very difficult can be, of course. You know, but there's a lot of good things here we can do in terms of, you know, that are specific to food systems as well. So that diagram on the left, I think, is quite a good reference point.
I think we have a little question for you now. How much of the world's economy is currently circular? It's quite a good question. Because I guess a lot of people wouldn't know.
Yeah, and it's a surprise. I think even it's a surprise to people who work in the industry, just how that figure sits at the moment. So there's no wrong answers, of course.
I think it's interesting as well that the circularity over the last 3 years has actually decreased. So yeah, we're not increasing. We're actually making negative progress in terms of circularity.
Yeah.
So I'll give you a few more minutes to answer that. Making sure everyone's awake and listening this morning. Okay, so I think the right answer is 7.2%. So currently at the moment in 2023, 7.2% of the world is actually circular of our economy. So I think the majority actually went for that. So maybe you're more, you know your stuff more.
That was, yeah, but the most popular answer was the right answer. Yeah, and it's low. I don't think it's ever been above 10%. As long as we've been able to try and measure it. So yeah, lots of good work to do in terms of yeah, improving that globally. Difficult challenge.
I think it's not just pressure on, you know, business or pressure on legislation. Everyone needs to work collaboratively to achieve that circularity, which is the important thing with the circular economy.
Yeah, absolutely. Now we'll look at sort of circular business approaches. So yeah, thinking more practically, really, about you know, how to fit that circular thinking into potential strategies. Well, we kind of, the diagram on the right kind of gives that nice kind of overview of the different types of approaches you can have. You know, it is about, you know, encouraging sufficiency in that supply chain, thinking about, you know, the resource value you've got, industrial symbiosis. So that would be, you know, looking at efficiencies and opportunities to have less friction, you know, in the food systems and the manufacturing systems you've got, and you know, looking at that product value as well, and extending life, which of course, you know, in sort of food and consumer goods is an important thing in terms of getting it to the shelf, getting to the consumer in a good condition. So yeah, a bit more detail on the left there if you want to kind of read more about it, but in a nutshell, this is kind of a high level idea of what the approaches can be.
I think as well, like we've said already, different applications might work for different business types. It completely depends on what you do for what works best. Absolutely. But a really good example is Patagonia. So they're a large multinational sort of business, but they have managed to increase their circular over the last couple of years, and they are incredibly proactive and rethinking their business, generating more money from the same products and leaning into materials like recycled wool that are actually cheaper than their virgin parts. So I think it just really emphasizes it's just a different way of thinking. It's not all about making more is going to make you more money. It's like having to think how to do that. So initiatives resale on their website, and also they now have in some North America going to gain items of clothing which they will have like refurbished. And they've got those that you use, like a jacket you can use once a year, or a fishing rod or whatever, I don't know. So you can now hire those in and buy a product. You can use one to have those. Coat. So when that coat reaches its end of life, you can recycle it incredibly easily. It's easy to repair because you know what the material is. It's just a more effective way in terms of it's elongating the life. And then partnerships, of course, they've got lots of innovative businesses that they work with to improve their supply chain, whether that's waste management providers, whether that's refurbishment partners. So it really isn't just them doing this on their own. They've managed to collaborate and work with lots of other people. So although it's quite a large business to use as an example, they've done a lot of things over the last couple of years to reach that circularity goal.
Okay, so focusing now on to circular food waste strategies, and diagram here really kind of ideally nicely kind of shows and explains how we can think about it, you know, in terms of making the most of the food, thinking about byproducts, bioeconomy, you know, sourcing food, growing regeneratively, and that's difficult, I know, for mass food consumption. You know, we can't feed the world on organic produce; it's just not possible. But you know, also thinking about designing, you know, marketing healthier food products as well that might have a potentially lower impact. So, green revolution is positive, but the difficult side of that is that, you know, there's an unfactored cost to health, ecosystems, climate, and society that we kind of do need to kind of try and take on board with that. So, you know, changing our food system is one of the most sort of impactful things we can do. An opportunity for cities. By 2050, you know, 80% of the world's food will be eaten within cities. So this is, you know, it's a concentration of people, resource, obviously, but also, you know, short journey distances. So perhaps there is more opportunity to have that more efficient food system in those urban areas. And the UK, I think, is at 80% urban population at the moment. So these are kind of the opportunities that might be there in terms of making change. Case studies. This is really looking at kind of the retail and the whole food chain side of it too. So the kind of the motto is sort of target, measure, act, which is quite a familiar way of kind of essentially having that sort of benchmarking, setting some goals, and then, you know, taking actions to achieve them. So, you know, Boots, they looked at 50% reduction in food waste by 2030. A lot of their food is obviously on the go, but they are making progress. So 18% in 3 years. I haven't got any more up-to-date data than that, but it does go to show that if you can start to have that measurable baseline, then, you know, take action from there. So Ocado, again, continues improving its tech process and relationships with suppliers. So what I guess they're getting closer to their supply chain and having more understanding and visibility in the supply chain. So I think what they're finding there is that, you know, food waste is reduced significantly. You know, apparently, according to their data, only 1 in 6,000 products going to waste. And as the, you know, good example of a collaborator, you know, it realizes it can't do it all on its own. It's part of it. You know, it's almost the end of a long, you know, complex global supply chain. So that's really looking at, again, getting close to its suppliers and looking at those food waste, you know, analyzing the food chain the food chain, and setting some goals around it, finding those hotspots and those opportunities to make things better. In terms of food system transformation, there are a couple of ways to kind of think about measuring it and setting targets. There is the material circularity indicator. So that's a way of essentially looking at the bill of materials for a product and understanding where all of that's come from, country of origin, and so on. And, you know, the calculations possible to do around that. We work with some clients in helping with that. And that can be one way to kind of at least set a benchmark and understand where the hotspots are for that particular product, and then taking action from there. And probably you're all familiar with Courtauld 2030. It's, you know, the UK's flagship collaborative program, helping businesses achieve this kind of transformation. So significant change here, really. So, in terms of their activities, we're looking at 50% to deliver that food waste reduction target by, I think, 2030. Greenhouse gas emissions, looking again at significant reductions in that, also water. So, it's more than just carbon, it's more than just greenhouse gas. We've got the water side of it too as well. So important to think about that, which of course is an increasing concern in all parts of the world. The UK, is no exception to that. And on the right hand side, we've got kind of RAP's take on the sort of opportunities really for transformation, looking at manufacturing, people, research, partnerships and collaboration as well. So a variety of kind of hopefully initiatives there that could spark some thought.
Yeah, because I guess in terms of food, it's it goes through all different systems, doesn't it? It's not just to households. Like we have a lot of the packaging reform at the moment is focusing on household packaging, whereas food is basically within every supply chain, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. And you've got obviously across the hospitality, which you'll be all familiar with, and the different kind of scales and markets and channels for food distribution as well. So yeah, there's it's a complex and global industry.
So I think now we've sort of covered the circular economy and sort of business practical approaches. We wanted to just sort of look towards the horizon, maybe what's coming in that might impact circular economy sort of application within businesses for you to sort of have a look at. So in the UK, we have a circular economy ambition, obviously to move away from that take, make, use and throw approach, to use materials and resources in a more efficient way, recycle and more repair. So each devolved nation has their own resource and waste strategy. So we're just going to touch on England today because we don't have time to go through all of them. But essentially we have 5 key strategic ambitions to get towards that circular approach. So hopefully by 2025, we'll work towards all plastic packaging being placed on market, being recyclable or reused. And we have seen the plastic packaging tax have impact on that. We've also got the RAP's Plastic Pact that's also working alongside that sort of ambition. Another interesting one, I'm sure, for a lot of our attendees today is to work towards eliminating food waste to landfill by 2030. So that's not that far away. So looking at all of those business sort of applications and strategies that Chris has touched on, we really should be focusing on that. We're then looking to eliminate avoidable plastic waste over the lifetime of the 25-year environmental plan. So that was published sort of alongside the waste and resources strategy. It's a 25-year plan that outlines essentially an in-depth version of the waste and resources strategy. So avoidable plastic waste, I think, is a really big one, and definitely in the consumer sort of space. A lot of people are very plastic averse, but we know plastic does have a place, but making sure that we're not having lots of single-use products or single-use packaging within that space. A really ambitious target is to double resource productivity by 2050. So I think that for DEFRA to have set that, it's quite positive, but I don't know how we're going to get there. There's a lot of things we need to consider. And then eliminating avoidable waste of all kinds by 2050. So that's really going into depth within households, businesses, and making sure that we're really just reducing that waste overall.
Yeah, and just quickly on that, whilst the resource and waste strategy is positive, I think some of the criticism of it is that there aren't perhaps enough milestones and there aren't enough sort of hard targets on this. So it's very aspirational, but I think for a lot of the industry, it's difficult to know how to actually navigate it and achieve it, because you can imagine that as a business, you could think, well, perhaps these are some kind of goals that we could also align with, of course, and hopefully you will be thinking about that. But yeah, so I guess the difficult thing is applying this to kind of like some actionable milestones and targets.
I think it's key that they're ambitious. They're not legally binding targets, which is what we have seen in other sectors. So they're still kind of just toe dipping in the water at the moment. So that's where, yeah, there's voluntary organisations such as RAP who maybe offer support in these areas as well. And we've just sort of pulled this waste sector roadmap to net zero to just sort of show roughly where there's a lot of things in terms of the packaging reform. We've got DRS, EPR on there, but we can also see some of those targets we've talked about: zero avoidable plastic waste, zero food waste by 2030. So good to just have that in the conceptual timeline, and maybe something to come back to and have a look at. But in terms of Europe,
Yeah, so really we're looking at sort of the bigger picture here, really what's happening outside the UK. We've got the European Green Deal, which is this kind of overarching approach to sustainability, which covers a range of initiatives and regulations and policies and aspirations. And that kind of distills into the EU Circular Economy Action Plan, which is kind of a fairly complete. It's looking at everything from industrial strategies, through to batteries regulation. So there's a lot to it, and it's got multiple streams of work. One of them is this farm to fork strategy, which is perhaps nothing quite new. It's a concept that I think everyone's familiar with, but it is kind of starting to build some kind of structures and tools and templates and methods around that as well. So it's looking at both regulatory and non-regulatory initiatives, which I think is a positive thing, because we know that businesses can often move quicker than the regulations and have more kind of perhaps innovation or opportunity for innovation. So yeah, and part of that, I mean, fisheries is one of them, but you can see in the diagram there, we've got kind of different approaches to the challenge, and different parts of that challenge. So good food for thought there, and it's not a bad read to kind of look at some of these things, because I think they are quite inspiring and quite practical.
Definitely, and I think although we're not in the EU, it still is very much influential on our policy development. And obviously, just because we're based in the UK doesn't mean that products aren't flowing in and out, and having partners. So it is really good to keep on top of everything that's going on, just so you're ready for when things just drop in unannounced.
Yeah, and I'm sure many of our audience today will be, fully part of regional and global teams as well. So this hopefully has some relevance. Okay, so I think our final question is, how confident do you feel engaging with the circular economy? So open-ended question with a few options. We'll hopefully see how people are feeling.
Give you a few seconds to answer that. I think it is hard, isn't it, for businesses? We've been set in this linear economy, and getting the senior teams to make those changes, you can explain it to them. But if there's maybe, it's hard to show the financial impact over a long period of time, because there are case studies out there, but it's like actually getting it in place, isn't it, to make that change is difficult.
That's it. Yeah, I think with circularity initiatives, there does tend to be a degree of uncertainty, and I think the growing body of case studies hopefully help give businesses more confidence that, okay, this worked here, that's something that we can adopt and align with. So yeah,
I think as well as explaining how important it is to meeting net zero. That is just one key thing you could take to if you've got net zero targets or science-based targets and things like that, and scope 3 initiatives, to actually reach those, you will have to at some point embed circular economy principles.
Yeah, that's it. And given that 90% of scope 3 emissions are typically within the value chain, of course, then that's an area to look at.
So I think just looking at the answers, we've got sort of limited focus, maybe very minimal or very confident. We've got quite a few of you sort of in the middle, where you've maybe focused on energy efficiency and renewables first. It might be a next step, or you're just sort of feeling worried seeing all these incoming regulations and you're just not really sure where to start. So yeah, I think you're not alone. That's where a lot of people are in the industry. So definitely, if you're ever looking for support, I'm sure Manufacture 2030 and Beyondly as well, we all offer sort of services within that to help sort of get you on track to your first step towards circularity, really.
That's it. And organisations like Ellen MacArthur, your RAP, have fantastic resources, mostly freely available as well. So they're a really good source of kind of inspiration.
Brilliant. So we'll just sort of nip on to the last bit of the webinar, which is more of this sort of practical approach. How can you maybe take your first step into circularity, and how can you take that first step into optimizing your waste? So we've talked a lot about reducing your waste prevention, but what does zero waste actually mean? And essentially it is quite a difficult concept focused on waste prevention that encourages resource cycles and products to be repurposed, reused and recycled. But in reality, it's a fairly long-term ambition to move towards the circular economy as a whole, and reflect sort of the ambition of completely eliminated waste. And we know that for businesses, that's kind of a long way off being an economic reality. So zero waste to landfill is almost like a little step up, your stepping stone towards zero waste, where you can have this attainable goal, it's tangible. So what is zero waste to landfill? It essentially is what the name is. It's a common interpretation that at least 99% of waste generated within your business practices, within the scope that you've determined, is is diverted away from landfills. So that means that the waste is either going to be reused, recycled, composted, or sent to energy from recovery. So we do see perhaps a lot of proportion going to energy recovery or recycled, but it's also a good way just to get hold of what's going on within your business and waste, and then you can set targets to move up that waste hierarchy as we've discussed. And at the moment, there's no sort of unified global standards to certify to zero waste to landfill. Lots of different companies have their own certifications, but it is generally accepted that 99% is within reason to achieve that. And again, I think it's not just achieving that 99%, it's also then setting targets to increase optimization. And without measuring it through a zero waste to landfill certification, you might not have the options to look and improve against that waste hierarchy.
That's it, yeah. And the approach from us is certainly to look at the optimization side of it first. I guess the actual score, whether that's 90%, 95, or 98, 99, whatever it might be. That's just part of the journey starting. So it's great to have that benchmark and then kind of work from there and kind of incrementally improve. So it's one of those things. It can be a continuous improvement over year on year.
There are a lot of benefits to zero waste to landfill certifications. It's supporting in that tackling those wider scope 3 emission targets within the waste category. You might be able to more accurately represent those and set targets against those. Third-party verification and certification, obviously you're achieving a recognised industry standard. It's putting your business on the map. It's making sure that you're acknowledging that you've achieved something that is certified. It demonstrates a level of environmental commitment and improved corporate social responsibility, which can put you ahead of competitors. It can also be important within those tender applications or roles. We've often seen zero waste to landfill as sort of like a tick box exercise within those tenders. So something to have in the belt when you're doing those. Obviously as well, you've got improved business resource efficiency and reduced costs in terms of management of waste and like needing less raw material purchases, so that's always good. And then it does, again, linking back to what we first discussed in that duty of care, it does offer a chance to do further due diligence and reach that legal compliance. And then finally, it sort of allows you to make sort of green claims because it's substantiated. You've had a third party that's going to verify it, so it gives you that sort of confidence. And if you are interested in zero waste landfill, please do contact Beyondly.
And finally, really just looking at some sort of parting tips really, and that sort of target, measure, act approach. And again, these helpful programs, Zero Waste Scotland's another one, Love Food, all kind of, I guess, hopefully familiar with the audience, but there's lots of kind of really great ideas and practical kind of approaches there as well.
There's lots of technological developments as well within like storing and transportation of food that can be utilised. I think it's really looking at the supply chain as a whole and looking at areas where you can focus in on food waste, especially during transport, or setting different levels of procurement in terms of, we're seeing the growing rise of like wonky vegetables, so I think we have such a high standard at the moment for food within supermarkets that if you communicate why you're doing that to customers, then that can also be a really effective way to reduce food waste.
Yeah, and finally on the right hand side, those are sort of the three areas really. You've got household, so that consumer phase, operational, which is probably hopefully where you've got control, and that supply chain food waste as well.
Awesome. So I think we're done there. So if you have any questions, please keep them coming in the chat, and we'll have a go at answering some of your questions now.
Thank you both so much. That was a fantastic webinar, really insightful presentation, particularly I think around the importance of embracing a circular economy, and how businesses can really take practical steps to do that. So really, really grateful for your time this morning. Just a quick reminder for everyone on the webinar that the Manufacture 2030 platform does have several waste-focused actions to support you in making progress in this area. So please do take a look at the platform. They can be found in the Reduction Actions database, and you can filter on the left-hand side to browse through these. We did have a bit of audio issue around the Patagonia circularity case study, so maybe there's something we can share as a follow-up there, because that sounded really interesting, but it just was slightly patchy. So yeah, we can pick up on that. And then finally, if you are interested in hearing more about how Beyondly can support your business, with food waste, or other kind of environmental goals, please do get in touch with them directly. We'll share a link in the chat now. And Beyondly are offering 10% discount on selected services for any supplier who quotes Manufacture 2030. So please do check them out. And yes, do share any questions in the Q&A. We've had a couple come through, so we can get started with these. But if there's any more, please do share them. So first one that's come through, so they've quoted, "There is no waste in nature. Please will you explain this in more detail? I presume there is an infinite time frame on this."
Yeah, infinite. I mean, so the idea is, and this is kind of based on sort of science, that sort of prior to kind of industrialized human activity, you know, the planet was kind of in a equilibrium, and natural systems were in balance, and there was always an outlet for a waste, and things were recycled and circled, you know, because it was essentially an organic ecosystem. So that's the idea there, and there's some good research being sort of to kind of flesh that out a little bit as well. So humans, of course, we've changed things because we've started to extract materials that can't easily be reabsorbed or regenerated or reused. So we've generated this waste material, and that's had pollution issues. It's had damage to our ecosystem. So planet's become less capable of kind of maintaining its equilibrium. Humans have essentially upset that, and as we grow in population and our resource demands, we all want more stuff. The middle class of the world is growing, particularly in developing nations. So that demand on the planet in terms of resources and its ability to support that, whilst one is growing, the other one is decreasing. So that's essentially the issue we're facing now.
Thank you. That was really, really helpful. Next question that's come through. So are there any food or food adjacent companies that you know of that are either achieving zero waste or have started their ambitions to get there?
I think that's a really good question. I'm sure there are some out there. We could definitely share some case studies or things like that after the webinar if someone will be interested in that. I think it's just a case of really, if you're on your journey, you're still, you're going towards that. So by setting baseline targets, you might not be achieving it in the first 10 years, but if you've set it, you're able to implement things over a period of time and work towards that goal. You can't improve anything unless you've measured it. So I think that is really the first step. And zero waste to landfill can be quite hard to achieve for some industries. So we see in construction a lot of the time, sort of you tend to have to lower that expectation to maybe 95%, 90%. So even achieving sort of that sort of area is still incredibly positive within that. So that might be the case to set targets like that first before reaching maybe the 99% that is the best.
Yeah, and there certainly will be food businesses and retailers as well that have that level of certification. At the moment we've worked with a lot of manufacturing companies, tend to be kind of engineered products, but yeah, it's absolutely doable, and it's the same principles that you would apply. You would essentially set the baseline, understand where all the materials are going, that are within your control, say on a particular site that you're managing, and then kind of looking at the supply chain. So upstream, what you can control on site, and then also downstream, and those are three areas that as any business we would kind of look at, and that will be the approach.
I think within the organic system as well, you've got to think of composting, anaerobic digestion, that kind of thing, which offers the support to achieve zero waste to landfill in those areas. So yeah, I think it's just really utilising technologies that are out there, new business ideas. We've been at a conference the last 2 days, and even there you're spotting things, new products that are coming up all the time. So yeah, just making sure that you keep up to date with what's being developed. But if you want pointing to specific case studies, feel free to get in touch, and we can send those over.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, so next question. It's hard to know where to start. So I think this touches on what you've just been talking about. But yeah, it's hard to know where to start. What would you recommend as the very first step to circularity?
I would think take a step back from the day-to-day and look at the entire kind of flow of materials coming through your business. And that sounds like quite a high term, but really we're looking at all the different material types coming in. So, where are you sourcing from? How are you procuring that? How is it arriving on your site? Or how is it being packaged as it arrives on site? What do you then do with that? Are there opportunities to look at maybe supporting your suppliers to do the right thing, or to help you in your ambitions? And then of course you've got the on-site as well. So that's probably an important part of looking at all of your kind of waste generation activities, where waste is generated. Are there opportunities to segregate better? Can we reduce that? Can we send some of the packaging back? Are there opportunities there? And then of course things like perhaps the packaging side of things, or packing out to customers. That's an important thing, but also thinking about the end of life. So you're really taking a life cycle approach, but also ensuring that you're looking at that as it comes through your business and what you can control.
Yeah, I think it's like a 360 view, isn't it? Which is why it's so difficult. But also I'd recommend sort of having a look at maybe some circular economy strategies from other businesses. They might have a one-page document or something that might be helpful to just have a look, and then constructing almost like a roadmap might be helpful. Within the first couple of years, you might only set some sort of really base level targets, because even we often go on a site visit and you walk around and you ask a question and they think, oh, we have never done that. It's just a case of going in and rethinking everything really, and just asking people, oh, so what happens to this and where does this go? Because again, in bigger, larger companies, often there's not that much communication between maybe operations and procurement, or so yeah, really having that communication with suppliers as well, because you might be able to look for an opportunity to send, I don't know, reverse logistics, picking up old crates when you're dropping new ones off. There's loads of things like that you might already be doing as well. So just making sure that you have like a whole, as Chris said, sort of take a step back and look at everything, and I'm sure you'll see some things that you are doing that just the generic efficiency in business, which will be circular.
That's it. And I think as a starting point, most businesses will hopefully be able to calculate a recycling rate from their activities, and I think that's a really good place to start, because yes, it's not the full solution, and it's to circularity, but it's a really good start. You can work from there and understand, okay, what more can we do?
Yeah, so you're sort of saying take that step back, maybe do an inventory of where you're at now, get that understanding of where you're at as a business across all of the in-scope areas, and then maybe the next step is getting internal buy-in and communication with all the stakeholders so that you can start to put a plan together in terms of making those reductions and thinking in a more circular way.
Yeah, that's it. And having that data in your hands, hopefully, or starting to acquire that data, that helps give you the kind of the I guess that quantifiable justification, for buy-in, for any further improvements and work, because you can calculate the kind of impact it will have on the business, which is obviously helpful for everybody.
I think, and finding appropriate circular economy indicators, so making sure that you've got things that you can measure progress against is really important. There's like millions of indicators out there, and it's just finding the right ones maybe for your business. Like Chris has just said, recycling rate's a great one, but you might also have, I don't know, food waste recycling rate, or like just specific ones that you could tailor to your business would also be a good recommendation, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect, thank you. Well, we have come to the end of the hour and the end of the session. So yeah, I just want to reiterate my thanks to the Beyondly team for joining this morning and sharing all of your excellent insights on how to reduce waste and embrace circularity. It's been a really helpful session. Just to also reiterate, we will be sharing the slides and the recording as part of the follow-up to this session. So yeah, if you need additional time to reflect on the materials, they will be shared next week. Yeah, thank you everyone for joining this morning, and I hope you all have a lovely rest of the day.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.